Alright, good day. Sorry that this video is posted a little bit late. I had already made this video actually. This is the second time I'm filming it. And the first time it did not save properly, and so it's gone forever. So I have to make another one here, but that's okay. We'll get through this here. Go ahead and turn your books to page 298. 298, we are dealing with the Frank the kings that would become known, the leaders of the Frankish people and the territory in in Europe that would later become modern day France. So let's go ahead and look at this. After the Roman Empire fell, there was a Germanic tribe that came over the Rhine River and went southwest into modern day France, the territory that they called back then Gaul. That's what the Romans called this area. If you look at your map on page 294, you can see there, right along the English Channel, the arrow of the directions that the Franks took. Now, the reason that this is important is they went through and they were able to conquer the territory that the Romans had controlled for a long time. All the way back at the time of Julius Caesar, he had gone through and killed many Celtic people there, had subdued a lot of the tribes, and took over that territory for the Roman Empire. And now, several hundred years later, when the Roman Empire falls, the final Roman leadership falls to a man named Clovis. Now, Clovis became the first king of the Frank people. Until this time, they had been more tribal, more separated, but Clovis was able to go and pull them all together there. He was able to go and he kicked out some of the other tribes that were there, the Visigoths especially, from southern France, southern Gaul, that was there, and really shaped the territory until the rest of time, until modern day, that most of the territory he controlled would become the modern day country of France. Now, throughout that time, different countries have different parts of it, but majority of it was always owned by the people of the Franks and their descendants. Clovis, after he died, divided his kingdom into four different sons. The reason he did that is because he didn't want them to fight each other for the one single kingdom. So he separated it into four different kingdoms, hoping that they would be satisfied with what they each had and not fight each other. It didn't work. In the end, they started fighting each other, they struggled, they plotted against each other, and most of them weakened each other, and their descendants would weaken each other. This line of kings would become known as the Merovingian, or I've heard different ways there, but Merovingian is pretty common pronunciation. The kings there that would go through. Well, about 200 years later, the kings in the Merovingian line were not the powerful people in society. The powerful ones were the leaders of the palace, the mayor of the palace. Think of kind of like the head butler, but more of like the vice president. That's where a lot of the power lied, or where a lot of the power was during this time. And one of them was a man named Charles. In the 700s, that was the mayor of the palace. Eventually, they had control of the armies, and he led an army and stopped the Muslim invasion from northern Africa and through France. We talked about that, or sorry, through Spain into France, and we talked about this some. And he goes through there, and he stopped them at the Battle of Tours. And the Battle of Tours, he got the nickname Charles Martel. The word martel means the hammer. And so he was able to stop them, stop the invasion, and got the name. Now, that's a pretty sweet nickname that you get there, Charles the Hammer. I'm sure any of us here would enjoy something awesome like that, but that he got it for something he did. But oftentimes in history, people would get their nicknames for physical attributes and physical reasons. And we'll look at some of those in a little bit. So they go through there. And Charles Martel went through and set up, his descendants became known as the Carolingian line. The next one in the line would be a mayor of a palace again, and his name was Pepin. Now, he had a nickname. Remember, as I said, sometimes it'd be the physical attributes we get their nicknames. He was called Pepin the Short. Now, when Pepin the Short, don't know why he got it. Don't know if he called himself that. Did his people call him that because they loved him, or did his enemies call him that to make fun of him? I don't know. But he was mayor of the palace, but wanted more. And so he made an alliance with the Roman Catholic Church. And the Roman Catholic Church, because of this alliance, will become one of the most powerful entities in the medieval world during this time. They would be one of the most powerful programs that was there. He went to the Pope and said, "Hey, I want to be king." And the Pope said, "Well, I need some armies to help drive off some of these pagans. Will you help us?" And he said, "Yes." So one of the bishops, the rulers underneath the Pope that kind of ruled over big areas of the Catholic Church, crowned Pepin as king. Now, here's the interesting thing: when he is crowned king of the Franks, if the Pope or a bishop can put the crown on somebody, the Pope or Bishop could take the crown off. So the power truly belongs to the Roman Catholic Church and the Pope, not necessarily the actual individual who is king. So he goes through and does that. After they conquer this territory for the Catholic Church, he gives his territory back to them. It becomes known as the Papal States. This is kind of like territories that the Pope was actually king over and would have that for a long time. Pepin's son was named Charles as well. So we have, from going through, you have Charles Martel, then Pepin the Short, and then Charles. Charles goes and conquers massive amounts of territory that other tribes and territories in Europe controlled, and he wants to set up an empire. But there's a problem. Will the Roman Catholic Church let him? Well, he promises that he will be Catholic and that he will follow the Pope and he will spread Catholicism through the land. So the Pope agrees. And on Christmas Day, the year AD 800, the Pope crowns him emperor. Now, as I mentioned, if the Pope can crown you king, the Pope can uncrown you king. If the Pope can crown you emperor, the Pope can uncrown you emperor. And so he went through and did that. After he controls this pretty large empire, many portions of Europe are controlled by him. He sets it up into manors. Now, a manor was a territory smaller, would often contain a large area of land and maybe have some towns, some villages, things like that, and then peasants that lived on it. And the nobles or the lords of the manor would work that area. They would be in charge of it. They would get taxes from the peasants, and then the lord would pay taxes to the king. And that's how it worked there. It worked really well for them for quite a while. Charlemagne also went through and was able to reintroduce learning. He set up schools and universities for families, actually for the boys of rich and poor families. He standardized handwriting so that when you got a book, which was really expensive, he made sure everybody was able to read and write what was put there. Well, after Charles goes through, he gets the nickname Charles the Great, but there's already a Charles the Great. So he is called Charlemagne. So you have Charles the Great, or Charles Martel, I'm sorry. You have Charles Martel, then Pepin the Short, and then you have Charlemagne. And Charlemagne realized that the territory he owned was very, very big. And when Charlemagne died, Louis the Pious took over. His son, Louis the Pious, inherited the empire, but he was not a powerful or strong ruler like his father was. And so it weakened, and parts of it broke off or were taken by other countries or empires or people groups. Now, Louis the Pious, now pious means that he was very religious. He was very good friends with the Catholic Church. After Louis the Pious died, Louis had three sons that he broke it up to. There was Lothar, and then another man who got a nickname, Charles the Bald. Don't know if he gave him that name or not. Maybe his enemies making fun of him, maybe him. Don't know. And then Louis the German. Now, from two of those, as after Louis the Pious dies, the country his empire broke into three areas. Two of them would become the modern day states of France and Germany in many, many years. About 1,200 years down the road, they would have this develop there. And so languages began to develop. There was the Frankish language and then a Germanic tribe language that developed there. And even though they were of the same family line, the leaders and the rulers were, these two different families of names and languages began to develop. Short section today, short video. Again, I apologize for it being a little bit late. It was deleted the first time I recorded it, so I had to redo it. You do need to do in your activities manual, page 219. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.